Hi, everyone. Thanks for everyone who's joined so far. We'll be giving it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Good to have you here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll just give it 2 more minutes and then we'll get going. But thanks a lot for joining and really looking forward to getting your feedback today and showing you a lot of what we've been up to over the last year. We'll be starting at 1:05. Really good to see Anas and Sean, both really valued community members. And Sean, we go way back. Anas and the team at XD House joined the community recently. So it's really good to have this mixture of community members from all over the globe and at different points in the journey. I think one of the things that I'm really looking forward to highlighting today is how far the product has come over the last year, and especially people who have been with us for a few years, I think will really see that. Awesome. So I think we'll get going now. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Really good to see a few of you here that are commenting. Please comment. Please ask questions. I'm ultimately what we really want from today is to engage with you as a community. I think one of the key things that we've had as a company in our journey over the last few years is we've been really focused on the product, and today I'll be talking a lot about that. But really where we're at now is we're working on improving the way that we communicate with you. We want to make sure that you're always updated on all of the things that we're doing that are valuable to you. We want to make sure that you as a community can connect with each other, because we think that's by far one of the most exciting things about Morta. So I'd really encourage all of you to comment, to introduce yourselves, and to engage to the extent possible. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to first just go over, quickly recap some of what we're trying to achieve. I'll then be giving you a demo, so to speak, that brings together a lot of the improvements that we've made in the product over the last year, and just to recap on some of these key points. And then I'm going to be talking a bit more about where we're headed and some of the changes that we've made. So again, for anyone who's joining right now, thanks for joining, and we'll get going. The idea, as I said, behind this community highlight session is really to make sure that you're aware of what we think is most important for you to know for that given month. So you'll be seeing my face once a month, where I give you some of these updates and some of the things that we think are really worth highlighting for you. Today, we think the most important thing by far is just recapping some of what we're trying to achieve, and some of the key things that have happened in the product over the last year, because we really think that there has been a dramatic change in the product. And for those of you who have been implementing it for a while, I hope that you'll appreciate the improvements that have been made, some of which you may not have deployed or benefited from fully yet, but that's exactly what the session today is about. So first, just to recap, I think we all know this, but Excel and Word are hampering the industry's productivity, is the way we see it. Regardless of whether I'm a design manager, whether I'm a BIM manager, whether I'm a sustainability manager or a commercial manager, what's happening is I access some form of database in one way or the other. I'll pull data from these systems. That could be an Autodesk Construction Cloud, that could be an Aconex, that could be a P6, that could be the ERP. And I update an Excel-based tracker or a Word document with that information. Ultimately, what that means is a lot of this information is disconnected. A lot of it is inconsistent. And then fundamentally, we have a really manual process. One of the things in the community day actually that came out was that we had in November was that a lot of the work is administrative work. We're not focused on the actual building. We're having to do a lot of this type of work. And really, we think Excel is the primary reason why a lot of these manual administration currently has to happen. Now, what really we want to achieve as a company is we want to enable connected information. And the way we view it, many of you here are from the information management circles. Ultimately, what we're all after is connecting information in one way or the other. And the way we see it is there are reference data sets within any project. There are external solutions that we ultimately have to connect to. Those could be the project schedules or the common data environments or the ERPs. But then we have trackers and resources that sit right in the middle. And right now, those are usually managed on Excel. But what we're doing is we're moving these into Morta. And on one level, what gets interesting is we can really add value to any of these processes specifically. But I think what's more exciting, even more exciting, is over time, as more and more of these trackers are built in something like Morta, we can start connecting these data sets together and really reimagining how these processes work. Now, the most popular use case that you're all really using the platform for, I would say, is tracking design deliverables. So as we all know, we have information that would be in an Aconex or in a Viewpoint or an ACC. We have some data that comes out of a P6 or an ASTA project. We have a designer or an information manager who will have to aggregate a master tracker or a master information delivery plan that has all of the key design deliverables that have to be created. And they do that by gathering information from the different specialists that would be involved. And the most difficult job of all on a day-to-day basis is staying on top of what has been uploaded into any of these common data environments. And that's where a lot of the time in projects is currently spent. Now, what we're doing with you is we're helping you move these into databases. And once we've moved them into a database, we have always told you that we can then integrate with a planning solution, with a document management solution, or with things like Power BI, for example, in order for you to visualize your data. And via these API integrations, you can start automating the tracking, for instance. Now, I wanted to stop for a second. I just wanted to just go over quickly that use case. I'm not without like going into depth into it, because it's going to really form or set the foundation for what I'm going to be showing you later. But I wanted to step back for a second and just articulate what we've heard from you are the reasons why you've chosen Morta, because ultimately these are the things that have guided our product roadmap, and these are the types of things that we've invested in making better for you. So the first and most important is, while many companies will say Excel is bad, or Excel has its disadvantages and you should be looking into moving into more robust solutions, what many will do is they will take an Excel workbook and they will build a hard-coded solution that you can then use. And we think the primary reason why Excel has stayed fundamentally is because Excel gives you a level of control that few other solutions provide. And what we're seeing is low and no code solutions, generally speaking, are coming out as a category that enable you to have that control. So they have some of the advantages of databases. They're accessible and cloud-based, but ultimately they give you a degree of control that would have been very difficult to achieve in most of the traditional systems. And like any of these no-code or low-code solutions, Morta has always aimed to give you that control and that flexibility and that scalability. But ultimately, you choose Morta because it's a platform that's dedicated to the built environment and the construction industry. And I think that manifests in 8 different specific areas in the product that we've had. The first and most important by far is integrations and interoperability. So you've all been integrating with one of Aconex, Viewpoint, ACC, or any of these other solutions, and we've been able to repeatedly pull data from them in order to automate your tracking. But what usually happened was we needed to either get access to your systems, for example, and then set up API connections. One of the digital transformation leads would do so, and they would do their magic in the background effectively, and they would get the data in for you. When it came to relationships between data, while we had some relationships, we still needed to do things with webhooks and with Python and with all of these types of things that made your life a bit more complicated and made it harder for you to achieve these relationships. When it came to standardization and reuse of data, again, even though we were able to achieve it, again, there were things like webhooks that we used. There were things like duplicate, for example, features that we used. And then even when it came to certain features, you'd have things like cell IDs and so on and so forth. So they were all working. It's just they were a bit sometimes difficult to initially set up, or they would take some time to set up or learn. When it came to automation and analysis, again, we do some magic in the background to get an email notification, for example, that's sent out because someone has filled in a risk register, for instance, or filled in an RFI or any of these things. Insight and reporting is by far one of the biggest reasons why many of you choose Morta. Ultimately, what you really want is a visual dashboard that highlights where the project is at and where the status of everything is at. And that itself, we've always been big on, let's focus on Power BI, but we found that itself had limitations, because sometimes you wanted to give your supply chains, for example, very quick reports that they could then benefit from, but you wouldn't be able to give them access to that in Power BI. But then also, while we acknowledge and we all like the fact that, and we all want to move into this world where there is no Word and there is no Excel and no PDFs, the reality is they're not going anywhere, and you can't change everyone around you in one go. And one of the things you've really appreciated is the ability to import data, export data, and do so in multiple formats and control the way you style it. Sometimes we do very custom exports for you. Sometimes we would help you set up importers to begin with, and so on and so forth. You also in many ways chose Morta because you wanted better data integrity and better data quality. So you wanted things like validation rules, for example. You wanted to have connections between the data and robust data structures. And then finally, you wanted to have audit trails that give you a very clear idea of what changes have been made. And in many ways, these 8 things we see are the key things that both differentiate Morta from something like Excel and Word, but also equally differentiate from other no or low code solutions, for example, that exist in the market, which is why we've always supported you in doing these things. But what's really interesting, though, is I've always demoed to you the platform as an end user, and I never personally set it up in front of you. What I would do is I would show you something on the platform, and then I would ask you to meet with someone like Mirna, for example, who would help you in the setup. And that was mainly because we didn't actually have the degree of control that we aspire to give you. And some of the things we had to do on top of the platform initially ourselves to make sure that it was delivering all of these benefits to you. And really what we've been doing over the last year is, while focusing on these 8 key benefits and key advantages in the product, giving you back that control and making sure that you as an end user could deploy and builder could deploy the platform without needing to come back to us. We think that's helpful for you when you're starting to use the platform for a new use case. We think that's helpful for you when you're rolling it out across your projects, as we have many of you now that are going, I've tried it on a few projects and I really like this. I now want to start deploying it on all of the other projects that I have. But so long as you needed to come back to us, it meant that you were losing control, and some of that key value proposition that we had for you was no longer there. So as I mentioned, over the last year, we've introduced a lot of features that have allowed us now to reimagine this onboarding process and make it much quicker and much more seamless for you. Now, we all know I'm the least technical person on the team. You've met everyone else on the team. They're amazing when it comes to things like Python and webhooks and automation, but I'm nowhere near at their level. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be putting myself on the spot, and I'm going to try and set up a new project from scratch that achieves all of the things that you wanted within an IDP within the next 25 minutes or so. And I'll be doing so while explaining it to you, so it'll be a bit slower than what I think a typical onboarding would look like. To challenge myself even further, I'm going to be starting a clock, and let's just see how this goes. So here we go. So effectively, sorry. What happens always is we have a new project. When I have this new project or a new workspace, so we've done some renaming on the platform. It used to be called Morta Projects. It's now called Morta Workspaces. Admins are now called builders, and processes are now called documents. All of that is with the goal of simplifying things further for you. So what always happened was you'd get on a call, and one of the team would have set up a workspace for you that you'd be able to access. And they would have done so based on a template that we had. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call this Community Highlights Session. And I'm going to create this workspace. Now that I've created this workspace, What I'm then going to do is I'm going to load it with one of the templates that is accessible for me from the community project and that's accessible for all of our community members. While I'm doing this based on our templates, equally, this can apply for the templates that you create yourselves. So you can see here, I can come in and I can create a new table, I can create a new document, or I can create from template. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create from a template. You can see we have several templates available. What I've done for today is I've packaged a template that has all of the key information management resources effectively in one process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say use this template, and I'm going to load it into my workspace. Now, what's happening in the background is Morta is currently loading this into the project, and I will get an email in, should be shortly, that will let me know that this has actually been generated within my workspace. So if we just give it a second. Now, just to explain what we're going to be doing, we have sections here around the details and scope, the delivery team, the information purposes and objectives, the information standard, the discipline and responsibility matrix, and so on and so forth. We also have information here in relation to the information, like the information delivery plan itself set up. And what we've done is we've templated the whole process so that you're effectively filling in the blanks rather than you're starting from scratch. So I'm just waiting for the email to come in. I have now received this email that basically notifies me that the project has been duplicated, that this has been duplicated successfully. So I can open it up and I can see it. I will sound a bit more anxious than I usually do because this is completely live and like, let's see what happens. But I'm basically going to have to diagnose anything that happens on the spot. So what you can see here is I've now loaded this template. It has a number of things. The first thing that I actually want to do is I want to make sure that my default document is this template that I've loaded. I'm also going to just do some styling change. If I wanted to, I could change my styling, as you know, but I'm not going to do that right now because I like the color blue. Now, you can see this comes in. I have things like my details and scope where I can update it, for example, as text. So I can go, this is my scope of works. I can add an image and so on and so forth if I wanted. I have things like my information delivery milestones that comes in as a table. I have things like my project delivery team. Again, this comes in as a table. Here, we're focusing effectively on the originators. I have my information purposes and my objectives. And then I have my information standard. With my information standard, we've just included these three for the time being as an example, but I have tables like my spatial breakdown, I have tables like my functional breakdown, and I have tables like my form of document. Now, or form of information. Now, what I can then see is I have another one that would technically be there is my disciplines. And for the time being, I've wrapped it up with a responsibility matrix just for the sake of example. And one of the things that we often see many of you trying to do is standardize a list of deliverables that you have to create per discipline, per work package, per information requirement. So what you'll see here is I have an MIDP that's been loaded in, and there's a column here that says applicable. And that column, all that it's doing is it's being retrieved based on what's in discipline. So I'm just going to pick 2 or 3 of these, and I'm going to make them applicable. And I'm going to go back to my MIDP. And you can see that this has now been ticked. Now, I kept it like this on purpose for the sake of this session. But if you're loading the actual template, you would have been on your end, once you've created it, you would go for something like the filtered version already, so that the end user, doesn't actually have to see anything that isn't applicable to them. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to save it so that we have it in that view. But I did just want to highlight that and for you to see that as it happens. So now you can see, based on the things that I've actually ticked, I can only see deliverables that are relevant to them. Now, the biggest thing that we know many of you are after is integrating with something like Viewpoint. Now, that can work with ACC, Aconex, or any of the above, but I'm going to be using Viewpoint to demonstrate this example. So I have Viewpoint for projects open here. You can see I have a Morta HQ project within which I have a folder called Drawings and Models. And I have this list of files within them. Now, what I can then do is I can go into my, sorry, I have a number of tabs open in front of me. What I can then do is I can go to my integrations tab. And if my account wasn't connected, all I have to do is click connect account, and then it connects. And I can then connect with my user effectively on Viewpoint. So you don't need to give me or any of the team access to your space. You have your accounts within Viewpoint or within any of these systems, and you can connect the Morta account to that Viewpoint account, for example, and then based on that, you can come and you can sync the data. So in order to do that, all you have to do to sync the data into a table, you can come and create a table here and call it the Viewpoint, just Viewpoint data for the time being. And I'm just going to put this under home, and I'm going to create this table. Once I've created this, what I can now see is I have the option to sync data at the top. Again, nothing needs to be set up. It's literally baked into the platform. I can come and I can choose what I want to sync data from. So you can see we have things like Aconex, Revisto, Aconex, ACC, and I'll be talking about Morta itself in a second. I can then pick the enterprise that I have access to within Viewpoint. I can see the relevant, effectively, one that I want to import data from, and then I can sync data. Now, I would get an email that lets me know that this has been completed. Given that this data set isn't huge, you can see that this has only taken a few seconds, effectively, for it to load. So you can see now I have here all of the data, the metadata, that I would have had access to within Viewpoint. Now, we're not taking, as you all know, we're not taking copies of the files themselves. We're just taking copies of the metadata. And once I've done this, Morta will, every 24 hours or every hour, depending on the plan that you're on, update this data without you having to do anything. So there is no more need for you to go into exports into Excel and so on and so forth. And when you're using Morta, there is you have full control over the syncing and what you're syncing into the platform. Now, what I then have is I want to go into my information delivery plan, and I'm going to be playing around with the sidebars later, but I'm just leaving them like this deliberately for the time being. What we then have effectively within the process is we've just retrieved the Viewpoint data into Morta. So I'm just going to quickly show you it in the process itself. And you can now see this data that we've just retrieved has been loaded into the process. So that's step one. This step on its own used to take you many hours effectively and sessions until it was achieved between errors that would happen between having to give us access to the system and onboard us and so on and so forth. Now, the next step that you would all want to do is really compare the MIDP to what's in Viewpoint. And that's where relationships between these data sets start happening. So what I'm going to do now is I've gone into the information delivery plan. You're all familiar with Morta. I've just gone into the tables module and I've gone into the core table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a relationship between the two. Now, there have been various challenges with relationships at like various points. And what I want to highlight today is I'm going to be highlighting two examples of how they work. The first is the relationship between the IDP and the CDE related data that's just come out of Viewpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the Viewpoint data. I'm going to retrieve this. I'm going to pick my deliverable reference ID, and I'm going to pick my name, and then I'm going to pick created by, and I'm going to pick date created, for example, and I'm going to add this, and then I'm going to add this data. Now, what we now can directly see is for these deliverables, we've had data that's been pulled in, which means that for these, we haven't had any data get pulled in because that deliverable reference ID does not currently exist in Viewpoint. I'm just going to clean this up quickly, and I'm going to remove the one that comes in. There is a reason why it comes in. It's because like sometimes they're the same column names and so on and so forth. So you can see I can very quickly clean this up. Now, what you then want to do is you may want to have a column which analyzes what has been submitted and what hasn't been submitted. In order to do that, what I can do is I can set up a new column. And this column, I'm going to call submission status. And I'm going to keep this as a text field. You know, if you're setting up columns within Morta, you can pick the data type that you want. I'm going to turn this column into a script. We've actually done a lot of updates on scripts. We still think scripts are powerful, and we're building a library of scripts for you to use and to make it even more accessible. So we have plans on making this even more accessible, but we really do think scripts is ultimately the way to go. But what you'll see is I have this within effectively my help desk material. I can take the script, and I can just update it based on the column names that I have. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to update the script. And what you can see is this has now given me values of what has been submitted and what hasn't been submitted. What I'm then going to do is a lot of us like to color these values. And I see Andy is here. We've had, and Rob actually, the things that you've done with colors and the number of times you've had to set things up. We've as I think many of you are aware, we've made improvements in the way that happens. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to set up basic examples of colorization. I'm just going to go, if not submitted, I want this to be in red. And if it's submitted, I'm going to put this in, sorry, this is a one-off value, and I want this to be submitted, and I'm going to make this into green. Now I have this as a value, and I now have this analysis. So I'm just going to go back to the template that we have, and I'm going to just refresh my MIDP and see where are we at. So far what we've done is we've loaded in the Viewpoint data. This is a table here. You can then see here we have the MIDP. We have next to the MIDP the data that's coming out of Viewpoint and this analysis column that we've just made. Now, the next thing that we have is you may want to set up a Power BI dashboard. Again, we are not trying to take on Power BI. That's not what we're aiming for, but we did get a lot of pushback from many of you that when you wanted to give your supply chain some quick reports, that was a challenge on Power BI because of licensing models and security, and all kinds of things. So what we recently released, and this is in beta, so there are things to be improved, but what we like is rolling out features for you to start using and for you to give us feedback on, so that we make sure that we're heading in the right direction and things are as useful as they can be for you. So we now have these charts. I can come here and I can pick a pie or a bar chart. Again, they're simple charts. I'm going to pick a bar chart and I'm going to pick the column that I want, being the submission status. And then I'm going to say the value column, for example, is going to be my deliverable reference ID. And now I'm going to save this value and save this view. So I've just created this chart view. If I now go back here, what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to edit this and just replace the view from the default view into the chart view. And what we can now see is we've loaded in a chart into this process. So we're approximately 17 minutes in. What we've already done is we've been able to make some changes to the MIDP. We've been able to load the template. We've been able to retrieve data from viewpoint, and we've been able to build a basic chart. Now, one of the other big things that many of you really appreciate with Morta is the fact that you can move out of having many different Excel files for each of your task information delivery plan teams or your task teams, and you can move them into the platform. So what we always told you is you can come in and you can create a view. And we're not the first people that have invented this concept of like views. A view is basically, I come in and I can filter, for example, on architect, I can filter on Morta, and then I can create this as a static view that I would then give access to my TIDP, to my task team, sorry. And so I'm just gonna call it task team view. But this is a static view. And what we quickly realized is that for many of you, you actually have tens of these combinations of maybe originators and disciplines. And you would basically be back to administering the equivalent of 40 different files. So you add one column and you used to ask us, how can I add all of these columns across all of my views? So we asked ourselves the question, what is the best way in order to do this? And what we always had within Morta was this concept of permissions and metadata. So I'm a member. I can give myself a tag. So I'm going to tag myself as Morta. I'm also going to invite two of my colleagues. So I'm going to invite Matt, for example, here. And you can see I can now assign a member as a member, builder, or an owner. I'm just going to keep him as member. And then I'm going to set my the tag for him as architect. And then I'm going to also add in two more people, let's say, and I'm going to put them as the, again, Morta people, for example. Now, I wrote the wrong email for Veronica. In any case, so I've added two people into the project. Now, what you can see is I'm tagged with Morta. Matt is tagged with architect, for example, and Jad is tagged with Morta. So what I'm now going to go and do is I'm going to go back to that information delivery plan table. And I'm going to go to the task team view. And I'm going to change this filter. And we used to have dynamic views, so some of you have used it, but you'd have to do these cell IDs and things that, to be honest, like even I struggle to wrap my head around. But what I can very easily do now is I can go and I can say, I want one-off, and I want it to be based on my tag values. And let's just hope So you can see, it didn't load for a second, so I was worried. But you can see that effectively here, this is just filtered based on Morta, not because it's statically defined as Morta, but because my tag value is Morta. So whatever metadata I come with, that's included, and that's what it's being filtered on the basis of. So now I'm going to go back into the setup that we have here, and I'm just going to make a change, and I'm going to change this to the task team view, and you can see that I can now see things that are related to Morta. If I wanted to, I can go back to my settings, and I can change myself from Morta to architect, for example. I think there is data there. And I'm just going to check that. You can now see it has loaded a different data set for me. And this is all without you having to do a lot of steps. So now what that means is you can set up one dynamic view for all of your task teams. And based on what originator or discipline they're tagged in, they will dynamically have access to that data without needing to do many of these steps that we previously had. And that ultimately saves you from having to create on some projects 50 different views all the way down to one dynamic view. Now, if I wanted to, I can download this as a CSV, and I can then bring this back into Morta. We've added in things. I'm not going to run it now because I don't consider this a setup, but ultimately I can append or I can insert and merge if I would just want to update values, for example, and bring that into Morta. So this is the use case that I would say all of you have tried and are implementing currently on Morta. And you know full well how long it took you initially to do the setup. Some of you would have taken no less than 4 sessions over what ends up being the span of, let's say, 2 months because of your availabilities, for example. And what you're really now seeing is, given all of the new features that we've added in, it has taken me 23 minutes to get a basic version of this working. And ultimately, we think that makes everyone's life much easier. This really supports your vision, ultimately, in standardizing your processes. But one of the questions that I'm getting asked by many of you is, if I want to mobilize to my projects, will I need to do a lot of setup? And the answer is no, because what I can now do is I can come and I can save this. And I'm going to say, a lot of you, for example, are on DFE jobs. I can come and I can change this to DFE. I can make a new template. I can set it as a template. And then I'm going to say DFE as the category. And then I can create from the template. And you can now see there is a new template that has been created for me here. If I update the image, it'll be clear. So I hope this has been useful so far. I just would I have one more thing to go through and then to update you on a few more things. But I'd appreciate it if you have any questions or any thoughts. Please start dropping them in so that I start addressing them while I'm going, because I'm conscious of time. Oh, the last thing that I just quickly wanted to touch on is just like syncing other data into Morta. What we always had So just like syncing data from other systems, you sometimes would want to sync, for example, things like your user data or your project resources data into the platform. So what you can now see is I can go in, I can create a new table, and just like I can sync external data sources, I can also sync data sources that are available within Morta. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to sync project members, and I'm just going to call this community highlight session. And I'm going to sync this in. And you can see this has synced in a copy of the data that I have within Morta itself. So ultimately, we're trying to make our own data reusable. Rob, I see you're on. You're someone who I know literally created a list of every single document and table that you made on Morta. You no longer need to do that. You can sync project members, you can sync workspace members, you can sync project data, you can sync workspace resources, and all of that just happens automatically. I think one of the most exciting applications of workspace resources is also if you're pulling into a central library, for example, that can help you streamline your audit processes in relation to things like 19650 Part 2. Just to show all of the BEPs that you've created across all of the different projects, for example, all of the IDPs, and so on and so forth. Now, the last thing that I wanted to do from a Morta product, from a product perspective, is I just wanted to quickly show you how we can then. This is another example of a relationship. Let's say I wanted to understand what my originator, which users were added for my originators. I can then come in and I can add a join, and I can do it based on the new table. I didn't give it a name, I think, so I'm just gonna do this very quickly. And I'm gonna go community highlights, originator, and I'm going to say I want the username. And I am going to add this. This is the second. Yeah, so there is something that's currently within the platform that doesn't allow you to retrieve them. So there is a workaround, but there's going to be a fix that's going to be deployed by the end of the week in relation to this. But what I'm just going to do is I've now added this. I can add username. You can see that this has retrieved, for example, Jad and myself into the relevant values. So I think this has given you an idea of a lot of the things that have happened on the platform. I'm just going to very quickly recap some of this. So what we did was we took this template from scratch. We set it up. We integrated with Viewpoint. We added some columns to the MIDP. We built a relationship between the MIDP and the Viewpoint related data set and did some analysis on it. We did a chart view. And then we set up the appropriate views for task information delivery plans, and so on and so forth. Now, all of this can be set up in a different process. So I can take my TIDP and I can set it up in a different process and so on and so forth. But for the sake of example today, I just wanted to have all of the key things in one process. Now, the last thing that I just wanted to very quickly show you is one of the things that we've had from you is you then eventually need to sometimes update all of these. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to update this and just put this all as home. And this has updated. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add everything except for my table, and I'm going to set this as data, and I'm going to bulk save my changes. This is currently working, and I can now enter, and I can see that my resources and my sidebar will have updated, and that my project is now no longer looking messy, and it's looking quite clean. So thanks for bearing with me. But I hope you found this specifically useful. I really wanted today to be something that's very hands-on, because a lot of these are the new features that we've added. There are many other smaller ones in relation to coloring and auto-numbering and all of these good things that you've been asking us for. But I really do think these are the ones that sit at the heart of why you're choosing Morta, and the things that we've tried to make as easy as possible for you. To give you back more control and to ensure that you're completely in the driving seat and that you are not reliant on us as a team in order to make changes on a project-by-project basis, or even in terms of your initial setup. Now, just conscious of time, I think I'm not getting through any of. It's either there are no comments coming in through, but I can't see any comments on my end. To be honest, coming through. I just have two. I have two more. Yeah, I'm just gonna go back very quickly, and I'm going. Sorry, I'm gonna go into Canva, which I seem to have lost. Ah, here it is. I just want to update you on a few more things. I think ultimately many of you already know this, but I just want to quickly recap. We've really simplified all of our pricing. Ultimately, we've had different things, different ways of pricing over time. What we found has worked really well for you ultimately is to charge based on the resource builders. So it's people who have access to the ability to create new documents or to add columns and so on and so forth. We used to have this concept for advanced users based on automation events, and it confused many of you. It made it difficult for you to predict costs. You were worried that suddenly we'd come to you and be like, here, there are 100,000 automation events, and you suddenly have to pay us an absolute fortune. So what we've really done is we've targeted simplifying the pricing so that it's purely based on resource builders and to give you predictability ultimately. All of the features that I showed you today would be accessible for anyone on the starter license. The big difference between the starter license and advanced licenses are you then have access to unlimited workspaces, unlimited rows, and things like options for one-on-one support and higher sync rates. The other thing that I quickly wanted to touch on is support and services. Ultimately, as a company, we think that we have a really cool community that's all pulling in the same direction. Many of your processes will have a lot in common. So something like what I just showed you today is the basis for most of your information delivery planning related processes. And the way we see it is if someone is giving us feedback to our community-based templates, then that does not need additional services from our end. It does not need any additional support. Really what we're doing now is we're establishing free community-based support and services. What that's going to entail and split into are three key things. The first is anyone who is asking us to build a template that would then be accessible to our wider Morta community, or make changes to a template and improvements to a template. So for example, some people are asking us to link the IDP to things like principal design trackers from a Building Safety Act perspective. For us, if the feedback is to our core community sample resources and templates, that's completely for free. The second is we have clinics that we're going to be introducing soon. So many of you will have things like, I'm building a BIM execution plan for the first time, or I want to automate things like email notifications. And you can do all of that effectively with our support. And we can do that in a public community clinic where we guide you through in terms of how that gets done. And then finally, we have forums that we're going to be introducing. And by that, we mean both things where you can chat with each other. We know many of you are already doing that, but we're going to be facilitating that much more. And we're going to be organizing workshops for you to all have conversations with each other and learn from each other. That really builds on what we saw in the community event last year. Now, what I just wanted to touch on, I can see there are some questions that have come in relation to from Rob, for example. So how do you get Morta to produce a list of all of the tables, views, or fields? Just like I did for the syncing earlier. So I'm just going to go in and do that quickly. And I've just ended up with opening a test, but I'm just going to roll with it. I can come here and I can sync, for example, my workspace resources, and I can sync test 7, which is the one that I'm in. And I would then get to see the list of resources that have been added for me. I've gotten messages from a few of you that LinkedIn has been dodgy. So I hope that that the session hasn't been bad. We are reconsidering whether we continue doing these on LinkedIn, and maybe like one of the points of feedback is that we shouldn't be doing them on LinkedIn. I'd really welcome any feedback that we can get, and you can also, just in terms of like syncing this, you can be syncing from many different projects. So it's not just from the specific Morta workspace that you're in, it's from all of the workspaces that you would be in. So I hope you've all found this useful, and that you appreciate the updates that have come through in the product. I think, again, many of you have not really been interacting, like I have not really, because you're on live jobs, for example. We've just made sure that you were we made sure that you continue to run. But what I did really want to show you today is that the combination of these features that we've added over the last year just makes it much easier for you to do the types of things that you're trying to achieve with Morta much more seamlessly. And it allows you to support the standardization that you're trying to achieve. It makes it very easy for you to pull the data from something like a viewpoint into Morta. And all of that is something that you can now control. And you do not need us to be doing things in the background for it to work. It can effectively be self-guided by you, just by taking these resources. And we think ultimately that gives you much more power as a user and as a builder. But it also means that you don't have to worry about things like, does Morta need to support us for these things? If we're adding webhooks, is it going to cost us anything? And so on and so forth. Ultimately, we just want to make this as easy as possible for you. And I hope that what I've shown today demonstrates that. We'll have a think about LinkedIn. Again, I'll look forward to your feedback offline in terms of how this session went. I hope you find these community highlight sessions beneficial. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today and who's taken the time. We plan on running these every Monday. There were 2 other things that I did want to mention today, which related to Power Automate and things that we're adding there to give you more control when it comes to automation. We'll probably have that in a separate session. And we also have had new updates when it comes to our API documentation that makes life easier if you're using something like Power BI. And we'll be sharing an email regarding that. And finally, our next session is going to focus on work that we've been doing with DI roots, because many of you will want to pull data from things like Revit. And we're rather than building our own plugin, we basically collaborated with them, and we're going to have a joint session the next monthly community session. I'm getting messaged by the team saying, you said every Monday. It's not every Monday. It isn't every Monday. It's once a month. We're going to have a session, and the next one is going to hopefully have the team from DI Roots join us, and some of you as community members who have started testing that. So again, I hope you found this useful. I look forward to hearing your feedback, and thanks a lot for taking the time today. Have a good day. You're welcome, everyone.